Alex the Beast and Eric the Wizard asked, which intellectual property do you think Disney will own in the future? All of them, Alex. They're going to own all of them. Hello everybody and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you send me all sorts of Disney questions, whether it's about the parks or the movies or the history, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. Now, before we jump into the questions, what I like to do is pick out my favorite answers from the last episode's question of the week. And the last episode's question of the week was, if you could pick any one restaurant from the Walt Disney World property to bring to your hometown, which would it be and why? And the two I picked come from Colin's channel, who says, I definitely want Be Our Guest. Obviously, they couldn't fit a castle in my town, but in a fantasy world, that would be awesome. Although I probably wouldn't even be able to get in. I love the realism there, Colin. You still don't think you'd get reservations. And then the other answer comes for Piscina Morta, who says, Hoop-de-doo review because I'm a big fan of bad puns, jokes, and I could eat all the strawberry shortcake all day long. I think that's a great answer, and I want to change my old answer to that answer because I love Hoop-de-doo. Now, let's jump into questions. We got a bunch of great ones this week, so let's not waste any time. Our first question comes from Marshall6000. Marshall asks, why do you think Disneyland gets more seasonal or special themes than Disney World, such as Rockin' California Screamin', Hyperspace Mountain, and Haunted Mansion Holiday? I would like it if Disney World did this to some of their rides as well, but I've never seen one in all the times I've been down there. So it's a great question, and one that I think, is asked often. If you've never been to Disneyland, they like to do what they call like seasonal, overlays. So like with the Haunted Mansion, they make it Nightmare Before Christmas style, stuff like that. And there's no official reason as to why they don't do it in Disney World over in Florida. But I think the two easy answers and easy guesses there. One of them is, I think it's a space and budget thing. Disneyland doesn't have the blessing of size that Disney World has, so expanding the parks is something that happens very rarely. That sounds weird to say now because they're in the middle of, working on a Star Wars land, and there's rumors of a Marvel land over in California Adventure, but normally that's not the sort of thing that would happen very often. On top of the fact that changing all of these things requires a lot more red tape than over in Disney World. Without getting too far into it, Disney has to adhere to a lot of standards that California holds them to when it comes to construction. Over in Disney World, they have the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which they sort of run, and it allows them to circumvent a lot of that red tape, which makes it a lot easier to build out and expand. So my guess is they do this more exclusively over in Disneyland because it's a lot easier, a lot cheaper, and they don't have much space, so they need to do something fresh and exciting with a lot of things that have been around for a while. Another answer that I actually saw in the comments that I think is a really great point is the demographics at these two parks can be very different. I mean, we don't have official numbers on it, but it seems to me, at least in my experience, is that over in Disneyland, you get a lot more locals who are visiting on a more regular basis. So there would be much more incentive to mix things up regularly so that for those people, you're getting a new experience. As we're in Disney World, I bet the data would show that people visit a lot less frequently. And so it's okay if they don't change very often because people are coming back and they're sort of reminiscing on the old attractions. I mean, I would love to see these overlays come to Disney World too, but there is something to be said about making sure that both of these parks are unique enough that there's something worth visiting at them. So it's not just that there's a Disney on one coast and a Disney on the other. It's that there's some stuff in Disneyland that you just really need to go to Disneyland for, and I think this is one of them. Our next question comes from Just Platinum, and Just Platinum asks, what Disney World hotel or resort will close first? Really interesting question. No way to really know what the answer to that's going to be. We have done a video over on Christine's channel. If you check it out, I'll throw a card in. I'll throw in a video card that links over to it. But we did a video on when we think Disney World as a whole might close, and I think a lot of the answers that we have thought of for when Disney World as a whole would close would also apply to the resorts there. I mean, obviously, the boring answer is whichever hotel is not bringing in enough money and costs the most to maintain. But I think Disney's the sort of company where they would actually try and fix things up before they just flat out close it. So my guess would be it would be either the Swan and the Dolphin. And the only reason I picked those two is because they're actually the only two hotels on property that come to mind. There might be one or two others, but they're the two big ones that aren't owned by Disney themselves outright. It was towards the beginning of Eisner's era when they thought they were going to be partnering with hotel companies to put these hotels together. And so they're still sort of outside of the Disney realm. And so I could see either the parent company dropping them, I forget if it's like Hilton or Marriott, or them trying to sell it to Disney, who like shuts it down and revamps them or something. But I don't know, my gut tells me it'd be one of those two. Our next question comes from I'm Not Chase, and I'm Not Chase asks, what do you think about adding more characters into the parks? Maybe like Aladdin, Hercules, Simba, Mulan, Woody, Nick Wilde, or Tarzan, etc. I love the idea. I want to see more characters. Some of those actually are in the parks. I actually just saw Woody on my latest trip over in Frontierland in the Magic Kingdom, so it does happen. But the reason I brought up this question and wanted to talk about it is because I think Disney's doing a great thing with these character spots, with these fast passes. I think that's a great way to plan around meeting characters. But I do think there's something to be said about the spontaneity of some of these characters just showing up and wandering around. And so I think there should be more walkarounds. I don't know. I think that's a budget thing at the end of the day. I think that to me, I imagine they value the character thing a little bit lower than, thrill rides and stuff like that. So I imagine, maybe if we see the budgets jump back up now that Shanghai Disneyland is open, maybe we start to see a little bit more characters. Maybe they start to work some more Star Wars characters in once Star Wars Land opens. And, then eventually Toy Story Land. And I'm sure you'll see some Avatar characters once Pandora opens. But for me, it's less about which characters I'd want to see and more about where I'd want to see them, which is less about like meet them at this point and get in line and more just them wandering around and interacting with guests, almost like Streetmosphere. That said, if I had to pick a character that I want to see return to the parks, and the best part is because of recent Disney news, this might be a possibility, but I would love to see the Rocketeer in Hollywood Studios. And because they are actually going to be making a sequel to the Rocketeer soon, there's a chance that might actually happen, which is exciting to me. And that's my question of the week for you guys. Which character would you like to see in the parks that you don't already, and why? Just like at the top of this episode, I'll pick like my favorite one or two and I'll call them out. Our next question comes from Hiding from someone, and Hiding asks, do you think the Ratatouille ride from Paris will ever make its way across the pond? I got to ride it earlier this year, and it's incredible. I know the Paris park likes to make little nods to the movies set in Europe and France in particular, but this ride is really too good to only be in one park. Now, I haven't seen anything about the Ratatouille ride. I've heard great things about it. I kind of don't want to watch it because there's a part of me that's hoping I get to go to Disneyland Paris sometime soon. But I've heard about this. Now, here's the thing. My answer was originally going to be no. I don't think there's a chance it's coming over. Ratatouille, as far as Pixar movies, not the most popular, not the newest. So it just from a, company standpoint doesn't seem like it would make sense. That said, I kind of changed my answer a little bit because really Frozen Ever After has set a new precedent in Epcot. And that is that movie rides based on like these Disney movies are okay in World Showcase now. And so now we have a Frozen ride in Norway. What's not to say they would put a Ratatouille ride in Paris or, an Alice in Wonderland ride in the UK or a Big Hero 6 ride in Japan or things like that. If they really are going to focus on Epcot next and revamping it and sort of bringing new life into it, I can see that happening. And if they want to balance out World Showcase, clearly you've got the Three Caballeros over in Mexico. You've got Frozen over on Norway. They're both on the left side of World Showcase. If you want to balance it out, put something over on the right. You've got France and you've got Ratatouille, which is already a proven ride. So maybe, I don't know. Our next question comes from Pig with Glasses, and this is actually a quick one. Pig with Glasses asks, why has Disney discontinued most of the monorail playset accessories? It's a bummer, but I think the only answer I can think of is it probably wasn't selling enough to be worth making. Usually when it comes to merchandise, it's really simple, right? It boils down to, is there enough demand for this? How much does it cost to make and sell this? What's our profit margin? And if the numbers don't add up, they cut it out of the plan. So my guess would be that, unfortunately. Hopefully they bring them back. I mean, I've always loved the little monorail sets, and considering Walt was a big fan of model trains, maybe there'd be a reason to bring it back in like that form, but who knows? We'll see. Our next question comes from Eric Wirtz, and Eric asks, What would you think about putting a musical venue on property over near Disney Springs? This could give the area more nightlife while also drawing people to parks before and after the events. Great question. I thought it was a funny question because it's sort of like history repeating itself. If you are not familiar with the parks from the 90s and, well, mostly the 90s, there was a place called Pleasure Island, which is now part of Disney Springs. They've gotten rid of it since then. And it essentially was an island dedicated to nightclubs and musical venues for adults, so that when the parks closed at the end of the day, there'd be somewhere for them to go to have some nightlife. Because what Disney found was, without Pleasure Island, people were leaving early and just going to Orlando so that they would, experience the nightlife down there. They wanted in on that action. So Michael Eisner made this Pleasure Island. And the thing is, it didn't really work out, obviously, because it's not there anymore. But the reasons for it were that nightlife, especially adult nightlife, doesn't really align with like Disney's image. And so you run into two options there. One where you Disney-fy nightlife, which I think a lot of adults didn't really like, and that's why it didn't catch on. Or you drop the Disney image in a Disney area, and then it doesn't catch on either because that's not what Disney's known for. And so, when Pleasure Island opened, they had problems with like fights breaking out in the clubs and teenagers, sneaking in and getting drunk. And so, it ended up being more of a headache for them than they really wanted. And that's why they sort of dropped it. And that's why I can't see them doing that again. Or if they do it, it would be something, I think, a little bit more classy. Like think of Cirque du Soleil, like something like that, where it's not like partying nightlife, but like, maybe a concert venue, but they would have to be really careful with who they bring in for these concerts. It would probably be like Disney, this sort of stuff that like teens and preteens love, less of like, the rowdier bands that like adults might go to, and then they, go wild and start partying like crazy. But it's an interesting look at like why it's important with, not just Disney, but everything, to recognize the history of what happened and why things happen the way they did, because otherwise they might repeat themselves. And finally this week, I saved what I thought was my favorite question for last, and it comes from Cardboard Belt. Cardboard asks, I'm going to Epcot this October, and I was hoping to snack around the world this time. I'm wondering how many different attractions or displays I'll be able to carry food and drinks into in World Showcase. I've never eaten a lot of carry-around snacks in the park before, so I'm worried that I might want to think about choosing smaller snacks so I'm not left standing around scarfing something down just because I can't go into a building if I'm carrying it. This would be easy to figure out in the park, but less so sitting here at home and trying to plan. Any info or thoughts on where I can carry foods or drinks and what I should choose to snack on based on that? That's an awesome question. First of all, I love the idea of eating around the world as sort of like an alternative to drinking around the world because, one, anybody of any age can do it. It's probably a little bit healthier. Well, if there's snacks, it might not be. But, it's just overall, I think it's just a safer way to sort of experience World Showcase as a whole. It's a great question. I think the answer is less about trying to find venues where you can bring in food and more about strategically planning how you approach a plan like this so that you don't have to worry about that. In my mind, when you threw this idea at me, my first thought was the best way to go about this is to do the attractions at a particular country before you even get the snack. So you start in Mexico and you go in and you ride 3 caballeros because that's what you do when you're in Mexico. And then afterwards you get a snack and you work your way slowly over to China. And the idea there being that by the time you get to China, you would hopefully be finished with that snack. Now, obviously the big question is, what are you eating there? Is it a big snack, a small snack? I feel like there are a lot of World Showcase fans out there who might know that stuff better than me, to be completely honest. But some of the ideas that crossed my mind when thinking more about this, because I tried to think like, what would I do if I was eating around the world, is one, that I would do the attractions first and then I would do the walking over after. But two, I would bring with me, because I'm starting to bring, a book bag to the parks when I go out there now, is I would either bring baggies or I'd bring like those like expandable Tupperwares, because here's the thing. Snacking around the world means 11 snacks. Now, depending on the size of the snacks, that could be a lot of sweets or a lot of food in general. And I guess it depends on whether some of those countries are going to be full meals. But the idea is, I don't know if snacking around the world, I'd actually eat everything. So if I brought like a couple of small little, Tupperwares, you could always, so long as it's not food that's like liquid based or going to melt, you could always have some of it, and then when you get to the next country, put it in your Tupperware, put it in your bag. Then you could bring it anywhere, regardless of what ride or show it is. You don't have to worry. But it's sort of like a way to plan on the fly, because like you said, planning that sort of thing on paper is a lot more difficult than when you're there and you're just following your gut, literally and figuratively, because you can plan all of this out, but maybe by the fourth country you're starting to get a little full and suddenly you have to change your plan completely. So I would say more than anything else, just be prepared. Bring something that you could put the food into so you could save it for later. Make sure you're doing your attractions before you actually get the snack. And then, strategically think about where you can enjoy this food. You talked about standing there and scarfing down food so you could get into an attraction, but you could always leisurely enjoy these snacks. You don't have to just stand in the middle of the road and do it. My first thought was of the UK, and there's this sort of little pavilion in the back there where they actually have musicians play sometimes. They have a little park area with benches, and to me, getting a snack in the UK, my first thought would be to go back there and sit down and people watch for a couple of minutes and enjoy the snack and then get up and move on. But you could also just walk and snack at the same time, and probably by the time you get to the next country, you'll either get all of it done or most of it done. I would love to source this question out to everybody watching here, because I feel like everybody's a fan of World Showcase on some level and everybody likes their own country. So what is your favorite snack and what country is it from, and what snack should he try here, because or he or she, because this is a really cool idea, and I'm sadly not that knowledgeable when it comes to food and drinks around the world, and so I would turn to all of you for your expertise. Let me know in the comments below, and we could help him snack around the world. So there you have it. Bunch of great questions this week. If you have a question that you would like for me to answer, all you have to do is let me know in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays. If you want more Disney content just like this, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I do 3 videos a week. On top of that, I actually also do a Disney podcast now with my best friend Christine, who you've seen in a lot of my videos here on the channel. We do a podcast called the Tomorrowland Transit Authorities. You can find that over at ttapodcast.com. It's on iTunes, it's on Google Play Store and all of that. We just started it. We're really excited. And there's just even more Disney to talk about throughout the course of the week. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Whatever you're doing this week, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.
I'm filming right now. Oh my god. What are we doing next?